Hello and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Jacqueline Dorsey of Lean Frontiers and I'll serve as your host today. I'm excited to bring to you today a short webinar on lean supply chain facilitated by David Veech. David has been teaching lean systems and problem solving for 18 years, first at the Defense Acquisition University, then at the University of Kentucky, and now at Ohio State University. Due to our limited time for this webinar, we will not be doing a Q&A session. Also, this will be recorded in case you want to refer back to it later. So for now, let me turn things over to David.
All right, hi everybody. Thanks for joining us. Hear an awful lot of talk these days about lean culture and culture changes and things like that. And I've even heard people say things like, well, we can't do this or we can't do that because our culture is just not ready for it. And so I thought I'd put this title, Stop Trying to Talk Your Way to a Culture Change, up to hopefully provoke some thoughts about what does it take to change a culture. And I've got a couple of ideas on that myself that I'm going to share with you now that really tie back to human behavior and back to engaging your people. So let me get started. I always like to start with what I look for as outcomes for a lean system, and that means I want higher productivity where things are faster, better, and easier. I also want higher profitability where I get things cheaper, I waste less, so there's the waste elimination piece there, and I want to be more competitive in the market. But to me, the most important one is actually this higher professionalism piece, where we get higher employee engagement, broader expertise, and higher skill sets, both cognitively and technically, less turnover and absenteeism because people love coming to work. It's a place that attracts the best talent, and it just creates a wonderful workplace where people really thrive. I think lean and lean tools and the application of lean leadership and management systems will easily combine all three of those. But when we talk about culture, I want to, what's a lean culture really look like? And I've asked several groups about defining this particular lean culture, and it's really kind of hard to pinpoint what you want out of a culture. So let me just start with how I define it, and I think culture is the collective behavior of an organization or a workplace. That's how we do things around here, right? And I've kind of broken down 5 different types that I want to share with you, and the first one is a culture of defiance. These are pretty dysfunctional organizations where management and labor just don't get along at all, where you try to introduce some kind of new change initiative and it really meets with nothing but resistance to the point where it gets crushed. I don't know too many places like that, but I expect that there are more than a couple. Most organizations that I've been to are in this culture of compliance. This is where people will pretty much do what you ask them to do. They'll bring enough effort to work to stay out of trouble. In certain times, when the economy is bad, we can ask people to do more, and this compliant workforce will do an awful lot. And that's how I think lean gets this reputation for doing more with less, which I don't really like that whole thought. I think we're doing better. I think the less is going to be reality, but in a compliant work environment, they will do an awful lot, but they're still waiting for you to take the lead. We want to get to that culture of engagement, but there's a few steps in between. Next is a culture of involvement. I see a bunch of these where there's a channel for communication between the people and the leaders. It's not too hard to get from compliance to involvement because all you really have to do is ask. The challenge with asking is when you ask, they will tell you. And in a lot of cases, not only will you get some good ideas about what you can do to improve your operations, but you'll just get a tidal wave of complaints and things that aren't really practical. Things like if we only had new equipment, or we need a new fork truck, or we need to get rid of Billy Bob, or we need to hire somebody new, or we need to get rid of this leader or that leader. And there's usually a swarm of complaints in this kind of stage. And sometimes those complaints where a leader can't really provide the solution, can't really buy new equipment, can't really hire new people, it gets overwhelming. So I have seen organizations that it gotten to this stage where they asked and had a little stuff going back and forth, and the tide was so strong that the leaders had to pull the plug and go back to being compliant. That's not where we want to go. We want to keep driving through this involvement piece into this enthusiasm piece. A culture of enthusiasm, I see a lot of. We do a lot of cool lean stuff in a culture of enthusiasm because I don't run into too many people who really don't have a positive experience as a result of a Kaizen event. So lots of people really like Kaizen events, and so organizations that try to get all the way to the lean side by doing a series of events, I think rest in primarily in this culture. What happens is they come, they love the Kaizen event, they do great things, they get great results, they're engaged, they're having fun, but Monday comes. Monday comes and often they wonder how they're going to finish out the action items, or they wonder, did we really mean to do everything that we did? And then they start wondering if what they did was the right way to do things. But the bottom line is they tend to wait for somebody else to plan and execute the next event. So we might have another event coming up. Oh yeah, I'm excited for that. I'm looking forward to that. That enthusiastic culture, that culture of enthusiasm is not where we want to be. We've all talked about engagement. I think people really want an engaged workforce, but I view the difference between enthusiasm and engagement as engagement, people will actually take the step to do something. So we as leaders have to create the environment that allows them and encourages them to take the risk that comes with engagement. And what we're going to end up with as we go through this spectrum of different cultures is we're going to see that people will do minimal things to stay out of trouble down on the compliance end. And as they get more and more toward this engagement end, they're going to bring more and more of this discretionary capacity that all human beings have. So they'll do things at work because they love doing things at work and because they see the results and there's an appropriate reward and they feel like they're making a contribution. A lot of great things associated with that culture of engagement. But since this is collective behavior, and collective behavior is really a function of individual behavior, I thought I'd talk about individual behavior a little bit too. And I got this idea about this cycle, and I've learned a few things about why people do things. There's still a whole lot to learn about why people do things, but it's pretty consistent. The scientific studies show that before anybody actually does anything, there is a conscious thought. And that conscious thought may be fleeting or brief. It may be impaired by other factors, and if you've got teenage children, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. So we do things after we've given it some thought. We decide to do these things, and then after that action, there's always some kind of consequence. It could be positive, it could be negative. So the thought really comes from our values, our beliefs, our experiences, and I think one of the more important things about shaping our thoughts is confidence. So it's the collection of these things that really shapes the way we think about things. And you can see that those experiences come from previous actions. But that thought precedes the action. The action might be at work. It might be a created experience that we lead them through, like an event of some sort, or it might be their daily habits, both at work and at home. Those actions always come with some kind of consequence that gives a result. We can often learn critical lessons, learn from those, and we can also set goals based on these. Now that thought to action segment is the decision-making segment, and I want people to make better decisions about the things that they do, particularly at work. The action is performance, and then between the consequence and the thought, that's really where we're learning. And if we're going to create a learning organization, I think this is where we need to focus. If we really want permanent change, we want a true culture change, we've got to address that thought aspect of this. So how do we shape somebody's thoughts? And if you've ever tried to change anybody's mind, you know that this is not a pleasant proposition. Fortunately, though, we can change the way people think by affecting that learning loop and affecting that performance loop. In other words, we can change the way people think by changing their work environment and requiring them to do something different, or changing those actions, and by changing the consequences. And we as leaders typically have control over those actions and those consequences, while we'll never have control over that thinking. So with that in mind, I wanted to kind of step back and say, when I talk about a culture that I want to see in organizations, I want a culture where people are going to do three critical things. One, I want them to try new things. Two, I want them to improve their own workspace on their own. And three, when they try new things, or when they try to improve their own workspace and it doesn't work out, rather than give up, I want them to dig in and persist through that failure. Well, it just so happens that in studies about people with a particular type of confidence, they do these same three things. So people with high confidence try new things, they improve their work, and they persist through failure. And I know there's a million different tasks that we could list as things that we want people to do, but I think really at the core, they all come down to these three things. If people at work will do these three things, our jobs as leaders will get a whole lot easier, the jobs will get more productive, the organization will get more profitable, and we'll have much higher level of professionalism out of this. So what does this really look like? This specific type of confidence is called self-efficacy. Self-efficacy defined as your judgment based on what you see there. That's our judgment of our ability to perform a specific task. So it's not as global as self-confidence. It's not as global as self-esteem. Self-efficacy is very task-focused, and that's why I like it, because in the workplace we're asking people to do something very specific. Only for Lean, we want you to do the job very specifically, but we also want you to bring your brain in and think about how you can do it better. So what this really is to me is a confidence that what I do will have an effect on the workplace. I know that I can. When I can and I do something, it has a positive effect. And I want everybody in the workplace to feel that. So I went looking for a model for how to do this, and this is the basic structure of building confidence. And you can see in the middle it starts with mastery, it's affected by learning, it's affected by coaching, and then the three of those allow us to give control over to those workers. So let's start with this mastery piece. When I talk about mastery, I'm talking about building competence. I'm talking about becoming an expert in a particular system or a function. And in Lean, we want people to be experts for a bunch of different reasons. And I think if anybody actually wants to become an expert in something, there has to be a challenge that is worth pursuing for them. That can be, I want to be a better golfer, and so that motivates me to go out and practice. At work, it can be a simple performance-related goal, like can we reduce the cycle time by 6 seconds? It doesn't have to be an impossible goal, it just has to be challenging, and it has to be challenging because it's a little bit more difficult than what people can typically do right now. So once we lay out this goal, then we have to kind of define a process to be able to achieve that goal. And we'll do that by experimenting with a couple of folks who are willing to try different things. But once we define that process, we'll document it with the standardized work, and that's what standardized, that SW is for. So we're going to use standardized work to build expertise. But that requires repetition following that standardized work, and it requires accountability to that standardized work. So practice in the wrong form doesn't get you any better. We've got to make sure we hold people accountable to the right form so those skills do improve. Then once everybody achieves that goal, then they get to set a new goal. And we want to encourage them to set their own goals, but we might have to build other systems to support that. So here's my argument for using standardized work and leadership associated with standardized work to enforce the repetition and accountability to achieve new goals. Very practical kinds of things to build expertise. But I'm not done with practical stuff, because the learning piece is also pretty critical, and study after study shows that an effective learning organization is a team-based organizational structure. And we've learned from Toyota, and we've learned from hundreds of other companies that smaller teams pull together better, they get better results, and they behave more like a unit. So a small team-based organizational structure is, in fact, a critical building block for a learning organization. We also need shared learning structures, and that typically is our problem-solving structure. A lot of folks are using A3s now. That's great. We can teach these people to go through the PDCA process, Plan, Do, Check, Act, or we might go through DMAIC with the Six Sigma approach, the Define, Measure, Analyze, Improve, and Control. I've worked on one that I call the C4 process, which stands for Concern, Cause, Countermeasure, Confirm. They all have the same underlying steps and the same underlying purpose. It gives structure to the mental processes associated with solving problems. Now, I want you to pick one and be standard for that so everybody can learn that same way. But then we also have the structure of that A3 or a little card for a suggestion or something like that that requires them when they have a problem or when they have an idea that they have to actually do something. And they need to do as much as they can within that team. The other thing is immediate and visible results. We got to be able to provide feedback to people very quickly. Okay, so that's our learning piece. And then we got the coaching piece. Coaching is not all that earth-shatteringly different anymore, but it starts with having a team leader role associated with that team. Now, the team leader role doesn't mean the team leader has to be the boss. So the term leader is often misleading. This is a role within a team, and it can even be a self-directed team where people rotate through a variety of roles, and one of those roles is a team leader, and that team leader role focuses on development by providing feedback from a different perspective for employees. Another thing is guided learning dialogue, so that coach needs to know how to have a conversation with the other people in the organization. The coach is also the one who escalates those problems when problems need additional resources that the organization can provide. So the coach needs to know how to talk to people. We need the coach is also the one who sets those goals. If the coach can facilitate the team setting effective progressive goals, they will increase that challenge every time they reach a point of stability in their skill level, and they can keep on pushing, and everybody gets better. All right, so the last piece of this is the control piece, and this is often the most challenging one because we always say we're going to empower people, but there's some risk associated with empowerment, particularly for leaders. So let me try to mitigate that risk through these control systems. First is if we have an accountability system where we understand the expectations and we understand the status, then we should be able to allow people to act on what they see is going on in that work system. We also want to provide this supported empowerment. We're back to problem solving again, so we don't just want to tell people, hey, you're empowered, and let them run off and do whatever they need. We need to let them know that they are allowed to do this and that we're giving them resources to do this, and if they need any help, all they have to do is ask, and we provide additional resources. And finally, it's that continuous feedback loop. The accountability system can provide a lot of that stuff, but it's really relationships among the team members, relationships with the team leader, and relationships with the leadership of the organization providing that continuous feedback that really allows us as leaders to turn over control to the things that we can't control anyway. The folks doing the work, they're the ones who need to be in control of this system. So it all works together as part of an integral system, and I call this, just for fun, the continuous improvement engine. And it begins in this field. That blue field really requires trust. And to get trust in an organization, leaders have to understand the expectations that the people have of them for their behavior, and of course our people need to understand what we as leaders expect of them. Once we both have a mutual agreement about those expectations, both parties, to build trust, need to work towards satisfying those expectations. And that's kind of a prerequisite. So if we have an organization that is not trusting, you're going to be in defiant or compliant, and that's as good as you're going to go. Leaders have to take the first step. You've got the power, you've got the authority, you've got to set some of that aside and go to that next step. What you see as an outcome for this self-efficacy is another, it matches up, it aligns very closely with what studies show are the outcomes of people who are intrinsically motivated. Now, intrinsically motivated means they do things because they like to do things. They don't necessarily have to have any kind of reward associated with that other than the satisfaction of a job well done. So if we can kind of build this work system around mastery, standardized work, learning in a team with other people, with a coach who provides that additional support, with the full support of the organization so I have control over my workplace, that kind of gets people fired up to come to work. And what shows, one, they're much more willing to share ideas. And that's pretty good. I want people to share ideas, but people who are intrinsically motivated, not only do they share ideas, they take the initiative to act on those ideas. And that's how we get these three things, that try new things, the improve your workspace, and persist through failure. So those are all initiatives. Now, if everybody shows up at work all fired up, I as the leader haven't set any boundaries or provided any process that allows people to act on those things, then I'm probably going to have chaos on my hands pretty quickly. And so we want to put a couple of systems in place. And for simplicity's sake, I've got a suggestion system and a standardized work system. Both of those require us to think through changes. If somebody has an idea that they want to put in a suggestion system, we need to teach them how to think through and evaluate that idea themselves. We don't need to send it off to some anonymous engineering group and let them judge whether it's feasible or not. That team and that team leader and that coach and whatever resources the organization needs to provide, they need to help that person think critically all the way through. What problem is your idea going to solve? Is it a real problem? What's causing it? Is your idea going to attack that root cause? If it is, let's go for it. Let's experiment, make sure it's going to work, and then do it broadly. Same thing with standardized work. With standardized work, we've got the expectation set. We know what time we're supposed to do, the quality level, the inventory levels, whatever else is associated with doing that work. And we've got that challenge, that goal that they're after. We want stability in being able to achieve that goal regularly. When it becomes routine that they can always hit that standard, then we have to increase that standard. And that's just another way of saying we create the problem by creating the gap. We're going to use that problem-solving process. You see, I've got the C4 up there, but it could be whatever your organization uses to take people through that cognitive process to identify the problem, what's causing the gap, what are the barriers to achieving that, what are some creative ways we can overcome that gap. Let's test those in a controlled environment and then broadly implement whatever it is. Now, what we're going to be doing with this system now is every time somebody has an idea or every time somebody reports a problem and we help them solve it by using this standard process for solving problems, they're going to get a little better at it. The first few times, it's really pretty clunky. Remember the first time you did an A3, it probably wasn't a lot of fun. So we want people to do this a lot. When they do it a lot, what we're doing is building mastery in that problem solving or that cognitive skill. So now we're getting the benefit of them being better able to do their work, plus they're better able to think through the ideas that they have. So now what I have is an increase in mastery that affects the team and the coach, allows us to give more control, which allows them to stay motivated, which leads to more ideas, which we process through these systems in this critical thinking method, which gets their skills improved, and it leads to kind of an upward spiral of performance. I think that's just cool as can be. But it is an engine, and so there's usually an exhaust from an engine, and I've kind of associated that exhaust with satisfaction on the job. And when I build a lean house, employee satisfaction is an integral component of that structure that we have to put in the organization. If you're a satisfied employee, you know that you're going to get three key things to contribute to that satisfaction. You're going to get meaning out of the work you do, you're going to be aware of what's going on in the workplace, and you're going to have some responsibility that you have to take. Now this model provides for meaning because the things that contribute to meaning are significance, identity, and variety. Okay, for significance, if I tell somebody that a job requires an expert instead of just anybody off the street, then I can say that that job is more important, and I want them to feel like what they're doing is more important. I get identity and variety through that team learning structure that I mentioned. If I've got a team and we're rotating through several different positions and different functions, then I get a variety of activities through the day, I get a variety of challenges to solve during the day, and it makes the work better. The identity comes from the team itself. So I feel like I'm in this with somebody else, I'm not in this by myself. On the awareness piece, the coaching, providing feedback, those visual systems that I talked about, both for learning and for coaching, those are all designed to make people aware of what the standard is and what the status is. So it's the plan versus the actual. Kind of the most important thing we need to measure, right? And then the responsibility piece, when we give over control and give them resources to have responsibility and to take responsibility for their own work areas, then that, without increasing the burden on those people, that really is a good feeling when people feel like they're more responsible for the outcomes at work. Well, that's the short version. I've been working on this a long time. I've got a lot of good anecdotal data. I've got a lot of good scientific data for different portions of this. And there's no reason for me not to believe that this is working effectively in a few very good organizations. Let's see what you can do. So I want to thank you for your attention. I want to turn it back over to Jacqueline. I look forward to hearing from you. I hope I've said something that makes you think about things. If you didn't like something I said, send me a note. Let's talk about it. Let me try to refine this a little bit for the next audience. Thank you very much. Jacqueline?
All right. Well, David, thank you so much for facilitating our session today. To wrap up, I just wanted to remind you all that today's webinar is being recorded, so look for an email following our time together for a link to the recording. Feel free to share this throughout your organization. So again, thank you, David, and thanks to each of you for participating in today's session. Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you.